Welcome to another episode of Consumer Protection and You with Ryan Lippe. Today we're going to be talking about sweetheart romance scams. So stay tuned. Welcome back to another episode of Consumer Protection and You with Ryan Lippe. Ryan Lippe is a consumer educator with the State of Ohio Attorney General's office, David Yost. Ryan, it's always a pleasure talking with you.
Great to be with you again. Thanks so much for having me and being so committed to educating consumers about their vital issues of the day.
Well, you have an interesting scam alert, if I can call it that, in regards to individuals of all ages.
Absolutely. These romance or sweetheart scams, they're really one and the same. Sometimes they're referred to as romance scams. Sometimes they're referred to sweetheart scams. But essentially, these perpetrators pretend to be interested in people of all ages in the state of Ohio. It tends to be older adults that get swindled for the most amount of money in these romance scams. But anybody can be a victim. Don't get me wrong. This is where a scammer might be hiding out in a dating chat room or on a bulletin board or in one of those dating websites. And they might fake a profile. They might pretend to be a military member stationed overseas or a business person working in another country. They might even send fake photos or documentation in order to try to prove their identity to the victim.
I'm assuming that the victims really are looking for some kind of relationship when in reality, they don't really realize how vulnerable they are.
Yeah, I mean, really, they tug at the heartstrings, these perpetrators do, the scammers, because they're looking for people that are vulnerable. I mean, a lot of these older adults may have lost their husband or wife, even recently. They may have gone through trauma. They may have, for one reason or another, just not had any romantic relationship in a while. People come from all walks of life, and everybody is vulnerable to meeting a scam artist if they are in a chat room, a bulletin board, or a romance site. It used to be that sometimes there were dating phone numbers where you could call up and chat on the chat line. More and more, I think that is being done online. And so some people that are older also have the vulnerability of being fairly new to the internet, as well as fairly new to the dating scene after years and years of perhaps being married to the same person or being engaged or being in a relationship with someone. The clearest I can say in terms of advice is if you haven't met someone in person, don't give them money. I mean, that's really you have to put a line in the sand for you as someone out there that's vulnerable. And so last year, upwards of 40 Ohioans reported losing almost $870,000 to sweetheart scams. Just a couple of examples. A Franklin County woman was the victim of a sweetheart scam with a man she had been in contact with through an online game chat feature. A lot of these online games on PlayStation and Xbox and PCs throughout the world have chat features along with the actual game platform. So she sent money to the man via Bitcoin, which is one of those new cyber currencies that we always hear about, but probably have never used before. The man deposited money into her account, which was then sent to his son's caregiver. The transaction was later reversed and the consumer lost $64,000
Wow.
to the scammer. Another one in the Dayton area, a multi-year online relationship with a woman he met on a dating website. Over the course of the relationship, he was scammed out of $10,000 worth of gift cards, and also had the risk of losing his identity because he provided the perpetrator with his social security number. So there you have one woman and one man, different parts of Ohio, losing thousands of dollars to someone, probably doing business in another country, that just has 24 hours a day to do nothing but perfect their little stories and their scenarios to try to get us for money. And they will tell you that they're a military member stationed in Afghanistan, or they'll claim to be an engineer building bridges in South Africa. They'll claim to be an oil rig worker off the Gulf Coast, or a contractor working in Nigeria. Business person, consultant. I mean, just like there's so many legitimate jobs out there, there's a scammer out there to use that profile to try to win somebody's heart. And after it's all said and done, they're going to run away with money if we're not careful. I mean, you're sort of relying on an online service that's in charge of connecting to consenting adults into a relationship. You might think that websites and chat rooms and bulletin boards and dating apps, you might think they would do some kind of policing of who's coming up with profiles. Are their answers valid and verified? Are these potential scammers vetted for who they really are? That's a question that you ought to ask a dating app, or read their policies, or a dating website, or any service you might use even in real life. Well, all of this is real life, but they have the website, they have the in-person dating that's sort of a matchmaker for those types of in-person meetings as well. Ask them if they do research. Ask them if somebody is verified and vetted before they are sending their information to you as a potential mate. You might get some interesting answers. They might not feel it's their job to police. They might say that it's up to the individuals to ask each other those kinds of questions and to verify in the best way possible that their email is valid, that they are really their age, they really are in the United States or in another country for a certain reason. Frankly, I'm not sure how much dating apps do in terms of vetting. I mean, once the person answers the questions that they ask them to fill out the profile, it may just be buyer beware, but that's really something that all of the Ohioans need to take into account before they sign up. Whether it's a free service or it's a pay service, you want to make sure you're not putting yourself in jeopardy and your personal safety even in danger, as well as your financial aspects of this relationship. And the fact is that scammers create phony profiles. They establish relationships, and they might try to spend hours and hours, if not days and weeks, communicating before they ask for money. They might say that it's the money's for airfare to visit, for hospital fees, for medical costs to get out of a foreign country, or to access an inheritance the scammer promises to share with their new counterpart. So it's really the sky's the limit in terms of these stories they come up with. The most important thing to do is, before you start talking with someone into any type of meaningful relationship, try to meet them in person. And if that won't work for the time being, do research. Talk to friends and family, especially if they tell you not to talk to friends and family. That's the time you should be suspicious. So talk to friends and family, do research, and sometimes a simple search of an image, a photo, or a bio, a search for keywords, including their name, may bring up stories of the scammers all over the internet trying to do the same kind of con job to other individuals. Whether they've been successful or not, we may not know, but Sometimes there are even bulletin boards that will post the photos and stories that scammers use to help potential victims stay away from these kinds of stories and these types of fictional relationships, because ultimately your money and your personal information is at stake.
Let's suppose that I join one of these services. What are some common red flags I should be aware of?
The Ohio Attorney General's office offers some tips to help avoid sweetheart scams. First tip is to research someone you meet online and do not rely solely on what that person tells you. Conduct internet searches, check with independent sources to verify the person's claims. Just like you wouldn't invite somebody into your home unless you maybe ran their background through the Better Business Bureau or the Ohio Attorney General's office to see if other people have had complaints. Do that same kind of diligence with someone who's after your heart. Be cautious of individuals who claim that destiny or fate has brought you together, or soon after you meet online, claim to already love you. Again, if it sounds good to be true, it very well might be. And I say that often, but here, your heart is at stake as well as your information and your money. Be especially wary if you've just lost a loved one. Many times scammers scour the obituaries for finding people who have recently suffered a loss. They know they're vulnerable. And talk to friends and family about any online relationships, even if the other person asks you to keep the relationship a secret. Remember, that might be because they don't want you to find out they're a scammer. Don't send money to someone you've only met online, even if you've developed a relationship. If you put that rule down for yourself, that can save you a lot of heartache as well as a lot of money. Never send someone money that you've only met online, no matter how dire the emergency is, no matter how plausible the love for them is. And be very skeptical, and I know I've said this before on the program, be very skeptical of requests to send money via wire transfer or Bitcoin or prepaid money cards or gift cards. These are the preferred payment methods for scammers. So if they're asking you to do business or get into a relationship where you're supposed to be sending them money through one of these sources, be even more skeptical and sort of for yourself raise that red flag of whether you should even be continuing the conversation with that person, let alone sending them hard-earned money.
You know, if an individual is lonely, it's very difficult to turn somebody's request down after they've spent a lot of time building up your trust. And I can see where individuals can easily fall under the confidence of that scammer.
That's a really good point. I mean, sometimes they purposely spend weeks or months developing trust in that potential victim before they ever ask for personal information or ever ask for money. And there's some stories they can tell about medical emergencies or about having to come back to the United States. Because remember, they're claiming usually to be overseas. So they might say they need to take leave from the military and want money for a plane ticket. They may say they're in business, but they can't cash a check in their foreign country because they only have access to American banks. They come out with all kinds of scenarios. I've even seen cases where they want the senior or the older adult to invest money with them in order to be able to claim an inheritance or claim on a pot of gold or claim briefcases full of cash. Really, the sky's the limit in terms of how tall these tales can be told.
I'm wondering, with the state of Ohio Attorney General's office, what can you do to really assist me if I've been scammed?
Well, part of it is education. At every step, we can educate you about the red flags of a scam and give some advice like what I've mentioned in this program. And we go around the state of Ohio. And in this pandemic, we're doing more and more virtually through social media and through TV programs. But we try to educate people as much as possible. The fact remains that some seniors end up in denial that it could possibly be a scam. There are family members and friends that sometimes need to intervene on behalf of that older adult. I don't think a month or a week goes by that we don't get calls from a relative or a friend calling on behalf of an older adult that hasn't quite managed to understand that they're being scammed. So it's a lot of education. And a lot of times, if the scammer's doing business with gift cards and wire transfers, it's very difficult to get the money back. It's really important for the senior to recognize they are being scammed and that they've been a victim, and to not be embarrassed, not to be ashamed, but let other seniors learn from maybe some mistakes they've made, or by not doing their due diligence when it comes time to send money over to somebody, that they're really in legitimate terms with them.
Do you see there's a lot of scams coming from prisoners in jails?
Well, a lot of times, and it's probably a good thing, a lot of times if you don't know a friend or family member in jail, you'll just hang up the phone if you get a collect call from them. Or if somebody's telling you they're in jail, you might just hang the phone up. I don't know this person. I don't want to deal with them. We do get complaints about folks getting calls from folks in jail. Either they get a hold of a cell phone, or they make collect calls, or they have money up and they on their books and they can make some type of call. I'm not sure what all of the jail and prison policies are. I know they don't let them have cell phones, but sometimes things get away from the guards and from the security systems. So I wouldn't be surprised if some of these potential victims are receiving calls from jails, from prisons, either in the United States or in other countries. But I think more times than not, these are scammers originating in countries like Jamaica or Nigeria or other countries, and they're simply doing this as their business. And they have 24 hours a day to perfect their scripts and to get their photos together, and they trade a lot of this information as well with each other so that they find plausible stories and photos that maybe haven't been used before, or they come up with lists of new victims. And it's really a whole trade and a whole practice in some other countries, including here in the United States. I don't want to neglect the fact that there are people in the United States that perpetrate these scams as well. But a lot of times we are dealing with folks in other countries.
So suppose that I'm a victim of the romance scams, and then I finally have said enough's enough. Suppose I sent a couple checks and there doesn't seem to be any resolution. What is my next step?
I would call the Ohio Attorney General's office and tell your story to make sure that, number one, if there is any way to get the money back, there may not be, but let us know so we can continue to educate people in your community and beyond in the state of Ohio about what is happening and folks to beware of, or at least what traits they have that people ought to be aware of. But before that, you should just be doing your research every step of the game. Of the dating game, so that you know exactly, or try as best you can to know who you're dealing with and whether there are mysteries that you can't resolve. If you can't resolve mysteries, or if their story seems outlandish or maybe even too good to be true, it probably is. It's probably time to develop another close relationship with someone maybe in your own community or a short distance away, instead of meeting people that are literally thousands of miles away in hopes that maybe your heart will fall for someone like that.
Is there a federal program that specifically goes after individuals that are involved in this kind of scam?
I know that it has certainly piqued over the years, piqued interest in federal authorities. The Internet Crime Complaint Center is one that rings a bell with me in terms of having done research into all types of internet-related scams. So if it's someone that has scammed you online through their internet activities, maybe going to ic3.gov. That's the Internet Crime Complaint Center, and that involves the FBI and various other public interests in law enforcement areas that may be able to do some research and try to at least get down to who's doing these scams and try to get the perpetrators out of their unfortunate business they've settled for. But, I can't say that every day there is someone caught by local or by federal law enforcement. A lot of these people evade authorities. A lot of them are based overseas. We may or may not have good relationships in terms of law enforcement in those foreign countries. And they may use a lot of mechanisms like caller ID spoofing to hide the phone number they're really calling from. So not only are they calling maybe from a foreign number, they're even hiding that number to make it look like it's a local phone call or a phone call from some legitimate source other than where they're really calling from. In reality, it may be a burner phone. It may be a phone that scammers use and will throw away eventually and start over with a new phone number. It's very, very inexpensive for folks to make international internet-based phone calls. It's very inexpensive for them to use caller ID spoofing, which again is technology that allows a scammer to put whatever phone number he or she wants you to see on your caller ID screen. So imagine how dangerous that can be in the hands of someone that wants to help you lose your identity or help you lose hundreds of thousands of dollars through a scam like this. Very powerful mechanism. And I wish it were more unlawful than it even is to use caller ID spoofing for nefarious purposes. A lot of times it is unlawful, but that doesn't stop the scammer.
You would think that the phone companies have created the technology to prevent spoofing of phone numbers.
Well, the fact is that there are a few cases where spoofing phone numbers is legitimate. For instance, domestic violence centers, maybe folks that are doing legal debt collection and not wanting you to know their cell phone number or exactly where they're located. In reality, telephone companies are starting to do better jobs of letting people know when they're getting a potential scam phone call. Sometimes with our cell phones, we even see a message saying that it's likely a scam or it's possibly a scam to let us know that we should probably let that call go to voicemail or go to your answering machine. In reality, at this point in time, if you're getting a phone call and you don't know who is on the other end of that phone call, and based on the caller ID, that doesn't tell you that it's somebody you know, let it go to voicemail or let it go to an answering machine. And by all means, check your messages often as you'd like to. But once you pick up that phone, that scammer may already be at work trying to analyze the situation and already get you duped out of personal information or money. Doesn't take them very long, or they can play the waiting game. Wait till you've really built up trust in them until they introduce an emergency or some reason why you need to send them money. So just having rules like never sending money to someone you've only met online, never sending money out of the country, never using wire transfers or gift cards to conduct any kind of relationship or business are very good rules of the road for trying to combat some of these scams from the front end.
I know that the Consumer Protection section with the State of Ohio Attorney General's office has a lot of information on not only romance or sweetheart scams, but a lot of different programs. And I am amazed how much information is out there and how much information you, as a consumer educator and the organization as a whole, really provides to we as consumers.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate it. And I wish more people got a hold of some of our information and not only read it, but shared it with groups of older adults, with coworkers, with people around your neighborhood. Our website at www.ohioprotects.org or our even bigger website, ohioattorneygenera.gov, is a source of a lot of our educational information. And there's tons of information on phone scams and identity theft and warnings about types of scams we've been dealing with and trying to warn people about. And we also have a help center. So if you or someone you know has been scammed, or if you need educational information, we're just a phone call away. We are at 800-282-0515. And ironically or not, we even have a chat feature on our website to help you connect with someone in our constituent services section that can get you the right information and help resolve any complaints you may have, or at least warn other folks to stay away from particular scenarios that you have found have violated your rights.
So suppose I wanted you to provide a Zoom program. Are you available?
Absolutely. We actually have 3 educators in the Ohio Attorney General's Consumer Protection section in our education unit. And what we do during the pandemic is virtual presentations to help people learn about identity theft, about scams, about cybersecurity, just like I'm doing today. So if you want me to do either a live or a recorded performance on one or more of these types of topics, or even issues like what are your consumer rights in a state like Ohio, we definitely can do that. Just get a hold of our section by calling our toll-free number, or again through ohioprotects.org.
Well, Ryan, I want to thank you very much for all the useful information. So to sort of sum up, what are key areas we should never do when it comes to romance scams?
Well, first of all, you don't want to keep anything a secret. Talk to friends and family about any relationships you have, especially online relationships. Be very skeptical of the requests for money sent, especially if they're through something like Western Union or Bitcoin or MoneyGram, or if somebody's asking you for gift cards. Unless they're a friend or a relative that you already know, don't buy gift cards. And also just be especially wary if you're particularly vulnerable. If you're an older adult, if you've recently lost someone, if your name's appeared in an obituary or in an article, you may be a sitting duck, unfortunately, for some of these types of scams. And I know that every age group has been impacted by a romance scam, but it's the older adults that are in vulnerable terms because they have lost the most money to these types of scams. They're the ones that are literally forking over lots and lots of money. Might be investment income, Social Security, insurance money. They stand to lose the most amount when it comes to these types of romance or sweetheart scams.
Hey, we're talking with Ryan Lippe. Ryan Lippe is a consumer educator with the State of Ohio Attorney General's Office, David Yost. Ryan, thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Patrick. I appreciate the good work you do.